this opportunity, this privilege of speaking to the party chief of the DMK party, honorable MPs, various
Opportunity, this
views,
privilege
and
of
also the
speaking
public at
to
large.
the party chief of the DMK party, honorable MPs, various opportunity, this privilege, and also the public at large. The party
Also,
chief of the DMK party, honorable MPs, various opportunity, this privilege, and also the public at large. The party chief of the DMK party, honorable MPs, various opportunity, this privilege, and also the public at large. The party chief of
ಹೌದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಸೌಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತದೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸೌಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತದೆ ಏನೋ ಆಡಿಯೋ ಸರಿ ಇಲ್ಲ ಆಡಿಯೋ
this privilege. At the outset, I would like to share that I am here in my role as a fellow activist with Sundar and also Ritvik in trying to advance environmental justice across India. And I do welcome and I'm really happy that the DMK party has taken the initiative of conducting such a critical debate on a most important topic. However, I must say that I am not in any way connected to any political party, and I work with a non-profit organization in Bangalore. That said, I want to start by saying that in the constitutional schema, the way in which we are supposed to work to conserve environment is in an harmonious way, harmonious not just with each other, but harmonious between the local governments, the state governments, and the center. This is a constitutional schema, and you can hear it spoken through Article 48A, 51AG, Article 39 in particular, and most critically also Article 243ZD, where the aspect of how we manage our environmental resources, how we construct development, how we actually argue for a certain form of development or another form, are all to be done through a deeply democratic manner, starting from the ground up, that is at the local government level. Now, the criticality of Article 243ZD should not be lost on us because it came through constitutional amendments in 1992, through the 74th Constitutional Amendment. 2 years later, when we had the opportunity of formalizing environmental decision making, not that it was not formal before, forest clearance were taken care of through the Forest Act. But in terms of understanding the impacts of environmental development, there was very little attention paid to social and environmental impacts. As a result, it was understood already in 1980 itself through the Tiwari Committee, in which people like Mr. Jayal, Professor Madhav Gargil and others were members who crisscrossed the country, and they actually warned the country that if we do not comprehend environmental and social impacts of developmental projects, there will be a time when there will be a cascading effect. And one of the key instruments they promoted was to integrate environmental impact assessment into all developmental decision making, and not necessarily as a ritual, but integral to it, not as an afterthought to economic progress, but as part of constructing the idea of economic progress. However, in the decades subsequently, we were sort of carried away by the idea that economic progress will sort out and settle the environmental problems and social problems. But here we are in 2020, quite sorry about the fact that we just completely neglected in the past decades this very intricate link between environment, development, and human rights. As a result of which we have a situation today where Sundar has very eloquently spoken about how the pandemic is a very, very alarming indicator of this gross neglect. But we don't necessarily we didn't need the pandemic. There have been warnings coming for quite a few decades, and more recently, more frequently through cascading events. Take the 2013 Bhagirathi floods, or the floods that seem to be happening almost regularly in every river across the country. the droughts that were quite widespread before and seem to be intensified now. After a flood recedes, then we have a drought. To add to that misery, we now have this enormous challenge in the Western Ghats and also the Trans-Himalayan region. All this should tell us that, this is a time to hold back, think clearly, think with a bipartisan view, and move forward to construct a nation which is secure. Secure not just for us, secure not just in the environmental sense or the human health or human rights sense, but secure in an intergenerational perspective. Secure in a way that we will take a very careful step forward so that 100 years later, 200 years later, when people look back at this era, they'll say there were some people who actually made mistakes but had the wisdom to correct them and move forward. Now, this is a kind of clarity which is required in terms of environmental decision making. So to think about it as an hindrance to growth or economic development would be to actually promote maldevelopment. But that seems to have happened in our country. In 2002, the Govindarajan Committee on Investment Reforms actually wrote down an entire chapter on how the very idea of having environmental clearances and forest clearances is holding back growth. And they said, this is a bottleneck to investment and it should be done away with. Soon after that, we had major reforms in the environmental impact assessment. And several of us argued that, this is an opportunity for us to fix the maladies of the past and not go with the Govindarajan Committee report. Unfortunately, we did. The National Environmental Policy actually does that. But in 2006, when the EIA notification came, we also warned that this was an opportunity to fix the problems we had from the 1994 notification, which unfortunately had not integrated state governments and local governments in decision making. It was a centralized system. The center would decide how things would shape in terms of law. And most critically, the criticism was that this is a mere notification. It's a subordinate law. It is with the executive wing of the center. And they will continue to manipulate as they have done for a very long time. Now, as you well know, from 2006 to 2020, we have had at least 40 major amendments to the EIA notification, and all of them have been gross dilutions. Now, in that sense, if you come to the 2020 notification, why is it against the environment? And I'm quite happy with whoever framed the topic for today's discussion. This is a law against the environment, and it is not a full-fledged law. This is an executive law against environment. Because you look at any opinion that has come out across the nation, it is to criticize them. And for genuine reasons, not necessarily for political reasons, but very, very critical and genuine reasons. When we have a pandemic, this is a time when we could have sat at home and reflected rather than promoting a law where when people did not have access to communication, did not have access to food, access to jobs, access to their money, they were asked to think about the future and construct a law and give comments within 60 days when they didn't even know that that law had been put out for public comment. Now, no government which is democratic does this. And you can also say that only a government which is steeped in authoritarianism will do something like this. Because go across the world and you'll see that no major laws were passed during the lockdown. The governments were stepping out and taking care of people, ensuring that they were safe, they were secure, they had jobs, they were given some money directly into their accounts so that they could somehow survive this horrendous pandemic. When there was sorrow in the family because somebody died, the government would step up. But here we were forced to worry about our future because of the pandemic and worry about our future because the causative factors of why the pandemics take place was being diluted. That is the environmental standards. Now, environmental and social safeguards are critical. You can take any number of economic books that have come of late. I mean, take, for instance, Piketty's analysis. Overall, what he is saying is that there seems to be a method in which the core values of living on this planet have been kept aside, and those values which arrogate power to a very few and accumulate wealth in the hands of less than 1% of the world is being promoted. Now, what it really translates into is a very anti-constitutional measure, because the Article 39 very clearly says that any development that does not work for everybody is not development at all. So these were not mere words written by Dr. Ambedkar. These were words written so that we could, in every step that we take, we follow them. Now, having said that, if you look at the current construction of the environmental laws, they're largely based on one of the first major reforms that, in fact, the first major reform Mr. Modi took when he became Prime Minister in the first term. And that was to set up the TSR Subramanian Committee. You look at the committee, it is based on something called the principle of utmost good faith. And as Sundar explained, good faith in who? The polluter. Whereas the Supreme Court has held repeatedly that the polluter must pay. And globally, it is understood the polluter must pay. What is the IPCC about? That those who cause the pollution must pay. Why are we struggling as poor countries that the rich countries must pay? Because they are polluted for 150, 200 years. So why should we pay their cost when they have accumulated wealth at our cost, at our collective cost? In the same way, within the country, the polluting company must pay, because the amount of profits they make by polluting, by basically offloading their pollution on the wider society and wider environment, is a cost that we have to bear collectively, or sometimes not even collectively, sometimes selectively certain communities bear. For instance, in Toothukudi, the horrendous firing that took place, nowhere in the world can you imagine such things happening, but it happened here. Or look at what happened soon after the so-called lockdowns were lifted. I don't know, 1 or 2, but whatever happened in LG Polymers, this was a plant waiting to blow up. It had been continuously supported for decades to work in a way that would someday blow up and cause scores of people to die and suffer. That means we have simply not learned our lessons from the Bhopal crime. I would never call it a tragedy, because tragedy is something you don't control. But the Bhopal crime it is because it was foretold several times. And despite having the 1974 Water Act and the pollution control boards to control that industry, politics, or whatever that we may call it, operated to allow the plant to blow up, and thousands died and lakhs have suffered since then. And there is no sense of compensating that kind of a calamity. But even there, if you take our impact assessment process, there is a critical part in terms of assessing the damage. And while you assess the damage, we have to understand damage on what? Not just human life, damage on the overall flora, fauna, the biodiversity. How do you assess that? That document that you create has to have all the material so that later on, if something goes wrong, you can find out if they actually assessed it right or wrong. Now, ministers from various governments have confirmed that most of our impact assessments are fraudulent. So if there is an opportunity, it is now to fix that problem. So if Prime Minister Modi and Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar truly care for this country, they will go and stop the EIA notification today, the draft 2020 today, and they will proceed to constitute a committee, maybe a bipartisan committee. Why can't a parliamentary committee sit down and say, okay, fine, just like the ND Tiwari committee did in 1980? Why can't we take a step back? The pandemic has taught us lessons. The floods in Brahmaputra is teaching us lessons. The floods in Madhya Pradesh, I mean, that's a place which never gets flooded like it has got flooded this time. And, we can go on the horror stories that are unfolding. But the true calling of this time is that we must not think of it from the perspective of those who support us politically, but to those we have a promise to deliver a part of this planet, this nation, in a secure way, in a way that the health of every child which is born 50, 60, 100 years later is not in a toxic environment, not in an environment of fragility, but in an environment of wholesomeness, where the food they eat is wholesome, where they can actually climb a tree and look at the wonders of this planet and not worry about their future. But to secure that, I think we need to start now. And on that note, I really hope that this effort that you have taken will become an effort for all political parties across the country, that collectively we will be able to convince the government of India that this draft EIA notification must be withdrawn. And if they do not withdraw, there is a call now for each one of us to take Article 48A, 51AG, 39, and whatever other articles we want, and march to Delhi in making sure this government does not destroy our environment. Thank you.